Hello, I'm Dr. Jigare Pancha, an occupational therapist. So here I have got you the another video of infections and tumors of musculoskeletal system. There are many more videos to know more things. Stay tuned to our channel. So here in the previous lectures, I have covered certain things about this topic. That is the fundamentals, the etiology, that is the connections between the time of occurrence, causes, and manifestations, the post-traumatic infections, acute infections following osteosynthesis, then infected non-union, then chronic post-traumatic osteomyelitis incidence, classification options for estimating the severity of the post-traumatic infections, and all the spread of the bone necrosis, age of the patient related to that, extent of the trauma, localization of the infection, that is superficial to deep, diaphyseal to epi or metaphyseal, and type of osteosynthesis and associated bone necrosis. Further, I have also described certain combined classification according to Kearney and Mader. So that is kind of this classification is mainly used in the Anglo-American literature that it differentiates four anatomic types of osteomyelitis. That is type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Type 1 is medullary osteomyelitis, infection within the medullary cavity, usually without the involvement of the epiphyseal area. Then you have type 2, that is superficial osteomyelitis, involving the outer cortical area, the subcutaneous tissue, and the skin. So the infection resides in an isolated area if you see in this type 2. And in type 3, that is localized osteomyelitis, involving the whole cortical thickness and the adjacent medullary canal. And there is type 4, that is diffuse osteomyelitis, as a fully developed disease of an entire segment of the bone, and it involves both the cortex and the medullary cavity, leading to extensive uh, devitalization. So that was the classification. Is difficult due to the lack of the clear delineation between types. As a result, the system has not become firmly established in certain countries, especially German-speaking countries, basically. So today we'll be talking more about the bone development around the fracture in the case of infections. So there are certain things which is to be taken care. As you can see in this image, I have mentioned very different things. So there's a 25-year-old male patient with incomplete wedge fracture with the direct trauma, plate osteosynthesis, and further. So if you see that there are certain main causes which must be considered when estimating total bone necrosis. So that causes can be can be accident, previous surgery, or conservative treatment, implants used. So so there are certain examining which are available. X-rays in uh, chronological order provides the most useful information in order to estimate bone necrosis. So taken together, they enable functional process to be identified. So over time, periosteal reactions, the fusion of the bone fragments, the local bone hypertrophy, but also sequestrations can be observed or at least surmised. So in diagnosis of an infection, if you see that the three-phase scintigraphy of a skeleton, possibly in connection with the SPECT or CT scan, or even that is computer tomography, supplement the suspected diagnosis. So, particularly in cases of infection, non-union, and chronic osteomyelitis. So, that is we always say that there are in the case of certain infections and certain disease, the union of the bone after fracture is inhibited or is delayed, or sometimes is non-union. That is because of the infections which are taking place in the musculoskeletal system. So that all things to be taken care when we are considering this aspects of the bone healing, and as well as certain kind of infections which are taken care in this type of musculoskeletal issues. So uh, here if we consider it, because before heading further, we should know certain terms which are very much useful in this kind of things. So there are certain called delay union, non-union, or malunion for the bone. So the long bones, as such, long bone fractures heal without complications in most patients. Only a small percentage of fractures between 2 to 10% result in delay union or non-union. So the process of healing involves several stages, that is including inflammation reaction, production of soft callus and rigid bone. So and remodeling as well. So delayed union is defined as the absence of radiographic progression of healing or the instability of a fracture upon clinical examination between 4 and 6 months after injury. That is delay union. Let me repeat that for you again. The delayed union is defined as the absence of radiographic progression of healing or the instability of the fracture upon clinical examination between 4 and 6 months after the injury. That is delay union. Non-union is again defined as a fracture that does not unite within 9 to 12 months or the extension of the healing process beyond the expected rate. That is called non-union. Further, malunion refers to the healing of a fracture with incorrect anatomical alignment. So, the various aspects of the stages of fracture healing, etiology, and pathogenesis of the delayed non-union, malunion, and the optional treatment modalities of this pathology is to be reviewed for the particular purposes and in order to understand this common occurrence. So that's why this kind of issues, if we see here, that are to be considered and to be followed in particular way and to be examined on that basis. So because if there is no healing, there will be a very much big problematic issues, and there are chances of certain infection. Even the non-union, and there are certain things that because of the occurrence of certain infections which are taking place in this form. So it is important to consider the certain areas and also to take other things in uh, consideration. Further, also, so if it is said that because if so when non-union, so when a bone breaks or fractures, the broken and the fractured means exactly the same thing. That is, healing of the bone usually takes few months to occur, so a bone is considered healed and united. So when it is strong enough to allow normal activity. So depending on many factors, they can take as little 4 weeks to 6 months. So when a fractured bone is not healed and there is little chance it can heal without after surgery. So the fracture is considered to be a non-union. So delayed union again is different than non-union. So delayed union means the bone took as a or is taking longer to heal than expected, but he expected to eventually heal without the need for the additional surgery. That is different with delay and non-union, because non-union is totally no union, and delayed union is there is union but with a considerable time. Also, infection is very much problematic, because here we are talking in the aspect that is directly related to the union of the bone. So, when a bone or a fracture is infected, it is called osteomyelitis, and an infection makes it difficult or impossible for the fractured bone to heal, because the infection impairs bone development and may damage the blood supply. So infection kills the bone and the blood supply to the bone, making healing nearly impossible. So an infection of a fractured bone is called as infected non-union. Infected non-unions are extremely difficult and time consuming to treat. So usually the first priority is to get rid of the infection. Once the infection is gone, getting a non-union to heal is possible in almost all cases. So that's why this is a normal basis which I like to share before we proceed in the topic at further. So the periosteal bone formation requires a living periosteum and provides evidence of the vitality of the underlying bone. So under infectious condition, newly formed bone is for the most part not susceptible to infection. Uh, and so there are some expectations that is if you see in this kind of image, that how it is being shown differently. So that I'll be talking further in the next lecture what are the exceptions and all. So the new periosteal bone may uh, centralize sequestra. So the lack of periosteal reaction over a prolonged period is indicative of the necrotic bone. And let me repeat that for you again, that the lack of periosteal reaction over a prolonged period is indicative of bone necrosis. So if particular bone fragments or segments lose bone density, then this evidence of bone remodeling and thus uh, viability. So if bone segments appear more dense than the surrounding bone over time, then this is evidence of bone necrosis. If two adjacent bone fragments fuse together, then at least one of these fragments must be vital. So, say following fusion, the ongoing remodeling process will cross the fragment margin and potentially revitalizing dead fragments. So, the formation of the irregular edges of the fine corners on the surface of the bone is indicative of osteoclast activity in a region with bone necrosis. Say small or large bone fragments separate from other fragments during the process, then these are called sequestra. Okay, I'll repeat again. So the formation of the irregular edges of the fine corners of the surface of the bone is indicative of the osteoclast activity in reaction to the bone necrosis. The small and large fragments that you find here and there, so that it considered as a called sequestra. So the bone remodeling processes originating from the vital areas of the bone combine at some point with those involving the formation of the sequestra from the dead areas of the bone. At this point, any local sequestra are successively surrounded by new periosteal bone formation. Temporary administration of the antibiotics may inhibit local infection activity and impede sequestration, so thus fostering revitalization without being able to heal the infection. So, under unstable fracture conditions, infections cause massive delays in bone healing or make it impossible for the bone to heal at all. So that is what happens in this kind of infections of the bone, and in the case of fracture, how these infections can lead to certain problematic situations. So if you talk here, there is a confirmation of the infection. So that is how it is being confirmed about the infection. So meeting at least certain criteria about the which provides the proof of the infection. That is, as I mentioned here, the abscess with pus discharge following incision, the presence of fistula, microbiological detection of some pathology or some pathogen in at least two samples, that is tissue samples or sonication fluid. This is just for information, I'm sharing these things. And histological preparations containing total or more than 20 to 25 keratinocytes in 10 fields. So that is more of a the microbiological examination which is there or particularly highlighted in this form. And fistula, I like to repeat it again for you. That is an abnormal or surgical made passage between a hollow or tubular organ and the body surface, or between two hollow or tubular organs. So that is what is called as fistula. Also here the thing is that the abscesses and the fistulas are expressions of deep infection, because there is a total passage of the bone, total infectious material and the infectious microorganisms which are formed in that particular way. So the abscesses and the fistula are expressions of the deep infection. They originate from bacteria that may have established in necrotic osseous areas and in a biofilms on the or implants. So microbiological detection of infection can only succeed if strict rules are observed. So fistula swabs often detect contaminating microbes and should therefore not be used as basis for treatment. So histological tests become much more important if microbiological results are negative, or if it is necessary to distinguish between contaminants and pathogenic bacteria. So to obtain meaningful information in precisely these situations, using a special form of coordinated histological microbiological testing of tissues and the sonications of the foreign materials is more advisable as such in this condition, but that is not in our domain to track the infections and to go. But this is just for your information how to deal with it and how to go further and how to correlate with the other professionals when you are actually in this field. So that gives you a total idea that how to deal with certain kind of infections and certain kind of problems or the musculoskeletal issues in which the individuals may go through. Also, mainly our role is to maintain their functional ability and to help them to continue their self-care task and the leisure activity which they are participating in particular form, and which helps them to consider and to be in that particular area. So in this consideration, the other thing that is post-traumatic arthritis. So this is there is a risk of post-traumatic arthritis in the cases of there's a direct joint injury or spread of an infection from an infected osteosynthesis into the joint during the first 2 weeks of the following fracture treatment. So timely detection and treatment of the joint infections is crucial for positive long-term outcomes. So as a result, clinician must actively examine patients for any joint involvement and start appropriate treatment immediately. So also say that can be certain procedure for large joints and also for the small joints, that is repeated you can say aspirations and simultaneous antibiotic treatment of the septic arthritis are generally sufficient. A few weeks following fracture or osteosynthesis, there is no risk of arthritis developing because by then the joint region will once again be completely separated from the adjacent and infected bone structure. So the long-term prognosis will depend on timely and effective infection treatment and reconstruction of the joints during the osteosynthesis. Inappropriate measures not infrequently lead to subsequent post-infection osteoarthritis requiring arthrodesis, that is ankle joint or the wrist joint. The insertion of prosthetic joints is associated with a considerably elevated risk of infection. There are antibiotic therapies also, which is again just for you, I'm just sharing. That is indications that antibiotics are used to supplement surgical treatment in certain situations, like with early infections and stable implants, following debridement as a curative therapy, provided that the pathogens are susceptible to antibiotics, effective against adherent bacteria. Uh, uh, so in these kind of cases, reform patients are uh, susceptible staphylococci or quinolone susceptible gram-negative rods. Then with infection lasting for more than 3 weeks, if the implants are unstable, if the implants are stable and the fracture is showing signs of bridging after the debridement, in such situations, antibiotics are administered as a suppressive therapy until consolidation. So once consolidation has achieved, metal is removed and debridement is repeated, and antibiotic therapy is continued for several weeks for curative purposes. With debridement, metal removal, and sometimes with stabilization using an external fixator as a curative therapy. So it is essential that an empirical therapy is not administered without first collecting microbiological tissue samples. So duration of the therapy problems, that is you can say curative therapy typically lasts 6 weeks for post-traumatic infections. A longer period is probably advisable in case of osteomyelitis that have persisted for decades. Suppressive therapy is continued until the fracture consolidation and the osteosynthesis material is removed. So if the implants are involved, and the therapy is administered parentally for 2 weeks. So osteomyelitis without implants may be treated orally for the entire duration of the therapy, provided appropriate antibiotics with good bioavailability are available for the pathogens based on the resistance testing. So, and also the clinical presentation of the acute infection following osteosynthesis has changed. It's because of the systematic use of the antibiotics prophylaxis. Infections that can be detected within the first few days have become rarer, while infections with a delayed presentation and less clear infection symptoms have become more common. So, as a result of the delayed detection of the slowly developing infections or the use of the empirical antibiotic therapy prior to the confirmation of the diagnosis, having unfortunately become more common. So there are certain things that because of the patients are generally discharged earlier from the hospital, the role of the rehabilitation specialist, that is us and the general practitioners, is critical in the early detection of the infection. So this is how we help, because we as an occupational therapist and as a rehabilitation professionals, we help the patient to continue their work, because if there is because if there is cancer infection, the healing is generally delayed. And also we help the individuals to take part in self-care activities and to maintain the hygiene, well groomed. So that is all to be done independently on their own. So if they need to seek any kind of assistance from the external factors, that is a kind of a very much burden on the individuals and poses certain issues. So to counteract this kind of issues, these forms are to be taken care into consideration, and we can help them to us. We can give them certain assistive devices like Reacher or any other thing to help them to assist with their daily functions and to perform certain tasks. Mainly the major issue which we face at this point of time in the ADL task is bathing, grooming, self-care, toileting, and dressing. So because in this kind of task, there is a very high risk of fall, and the transfers is very much essential for the patient at this point. So tricep strengthening is very much involved if there is a lower limb fracture. Basically, let me tell you this thing, because this infection which I told is not generalized for the lower limb. This can be any fracture of the upper limb or the lower limb. So if there is lower limb fracture and there is a need of transfer of tricep strengthening, is very much essential at this point of time to enable the patient to perform well. So that's how we have discussed about certain infections post the fracture, and which defects the normal healing pattern of the fracture. So in the also next lecture, we'll be discussing certain early first presentation of the infected osteosynthesis, clinical symptoms and diagnosis procedures, also indications for active treatment, surgical treatment which is used in these bone transplants, plastic defect closure, prognosis and complications, delayed first presentation. So this all further we'll be talking in the next lectures of infections and tumors of the musculoskeletal system. So this is all about for the today's lecture, and we will be continuing this in the part 5 of same, the infections and tumors of the musculoskeletal system. And I have mentioned the references for your reference in case to know deeper about the topic, or to know anything extra about the concerned topic. Thank you.